Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is Tuesday, April 22nd. This will be maybe the last thing I'll add about the thoughtlessness. I'm sure I'll talk about this more, but this will probably be the last video that'll be just for the Gratefullness Meditation channel, or standalone video for the Gratefullness Meditation channel. And this will be the last voiceover for the 190th edition of the Journey series. And so I had two experiences I want to share, and then I want to get to some comments. And the first thing is I did the 9 p.m. prayer, and I switched into the thoughtlessness state. Again, there's thoughts. I mean, it's not completely thoughtless. It's things come and go, but it's just a totally different, it's just a different brainwave. I don't know what you would call it. Like, I don't know what the physical aspect of it is. And I was feeling very peacefully internally, but my body was itchy and restless. And I've talked about this recently, how my wife and I had a really bad night about 3 weeks ago. This is kind of when all this started. And I was really restless and like crawling out of my skin. And, I talked to my wife the next day, and she said she felt the same way. And I mentioned it, and a lot of people have been having nights like that. I mean, a lot of people had a night like that. It was a Friday, maybe a couple Fridays ago. It was like maybe the 13th of, it was a full moon, whatever it was. But then I had a couple weird nights like that. Not exactly like that, but I was having trouble falling asleep. So it seems like something was going on outside of, whatever, like more than just a personal thing. Other people are experiencing this. But there is restlessness in meditation. And the restlessness is kind of the worst, because the meditations just seem to go on forever. And you're aware of being uncomfortable, or, be something, sometimes like your nose will run, or there'll be just, if there's real severe cleaning, there'll be some kind of very, irritability, and just time seems to be going on, it's like a turtle going really slowly. And, what I recognized when I was doing the 9 p.m. prayer last night was I was physically agitated. I took a little nap probably about 15 minutes before the 9 p.m. prayer. My wife and I were watching TV, and we both got sleepy. And then I woke up to do the prayer. And, I was very calm inside, like thoughtless state, the whole thing, feeling really good. But I could feel my body almost like I was disconnected from it. But it was, I was just like maybe it was uncomfortable and just irritable, and just, it was kind of a weird thing to have a very calm, like feeling calm, like inside my, my mind and my internal condition, and feeling vibrations and like the subtle energy, and then having my body be physically restless, which is kind of interesting. The other thing is, I just did the Tuesday, April 22nd sitting, and the sitting last week was just all thoughtlessness and just deep sitting from the beginning to the end. But this sitting, I don't want to say I was restless, but I had trouble focusing on the thoughtlessness. Like, I had more thoughts. Like, I could feel I was in the thoughtlessness state, but, I kept on drifting out of it, or drifting, thoughts were drifting in or whatever. But then towards the middle of it, it started to kick in. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then it became a very deep sitting, thought-free sitting. And so with that, I had various comments that I want to get to. Somebody wrote this one. I currently reading the chapter Nothingness in the book Heart of the Lion by Charji, which kind of speaks to what you say here. Sahaj Marg has a wonderful way of synchronistic guidance. Thanks, Paul. Top work, fella. I have the Heart of the Lion book. It isn't one. It's probably like one of my least favorite books. There are books about becoming nothing and, these things. It's part of the goal of the system. I want to reread that chapter. I have the book here. That book's more readily available for whatever reason. A lot of people have, it seems like there are a lot of the Heart of the Lion available on eBay and so forth. Then somebody wrote, ain't you worried that you might, this was thoughtfulness state at the time of death. Ain't you worried that you might condition yourselves to think less and therefore become dumb? Therefore dumbed down. So the opposite has happened. I just feel like my voiceovers are just sharper and better. Like I just feel sharper. I feel, going into that state is it relaxes the mind, and anything where you get good periods of rest. But ultimately, and I should talk about this. It's some other standalone video, but this is something. Again, this will be in the Journey series and also here. The Sahaj Marg system talks about a divine state of ignorance, and Babaji had accomplished that state. And that state involved knowing pretty much nothing and possessing nothing of your own and relying on God 100%. And so if somebody asked you a question, you would have to consult God for the answer. I mean, it wasn't like that dramatic, but basically that. Like Babaji knew nothing, could remember nothing. He lost his memory from an operation he had. They gave him ether. And so he already had memory issues. And, he would intercommune with Lalaji or some of these divine beings and ultimately, God, and would channel any sort of information that came to, that he said to people. So nothing that he said was really his. Nothing was coming from his thought process. It was all through his spiritual experience. He didn't have, memory of books that he had read or things that he had seen. There was a time where he was reading one of his books, and somebody handed him his book, and he didn't know it was his. And he was reading. And he goes, "Oh, this is very good. Who wrote it?" And they said, "Look at the back." And he said, "Oh, Ramchandra." And he goes, "Oh, is that me? I wrote." So when Sahaj Marg first started, there were no books, and people were like, "You gotta write books." And he said, "I'm not a writer. I don't. We just, of course, with that kind of, he had an 8th grade level of education, which was probably second or third year of high school here, different sort of education." He spoke multiple languages and he had some, abilities. And he worked as a court clerical, person, a court clerk in some building. He had some, he was considered educated. But he, like I said, he didn't want to copy other people's ideas. He wanted to have like original thought and connect to the divinity within him and get the information from within, which, at a very young age, he had that realization. And, these people wanted books. When he made a preceptor, he wouldn't explain how to give sittings. He just figured they would figure it out through the meditative process. And that wasn't the case, right? But, he was able to figure it out through his own spiritual journey and be guided. And he came up with all these things, or he was given these things. These things were channeled to him. And so, he was the ultimate channeler. He was the ultimate, conduit for divinity. And so they were like, "You got to write books." So he said, "All right." He prayed to Lalaji, and Lalaji said, "Here, I'll dictate something. Just write it down." And so, like, all this information in this books, there's 5 books. They're sublime. Reality at Dawn being probably the most understandable one. But they come from a very, a state of consciousness where he's, basically not writing. It's just, in people who write, or produce this kind of content or are creative, you get into this flow where information is descending into you. And there's different levels of divinity in that, but it's, there's channeling is a big part of everything. And so it definitely exists in the Sahaj Marg system. And so his 5 books came from that state of consciousness, right? And so what he called it was divine ignorance, like you were ignorant of everything, but you could answer anything because of your strong connection to divinity, and God would give you the answer when you needed it, right? It's like people rely on ChatGPT now and Google search and all these things and the internet, like he relied on the Ethernet. And so anyways, I'm going to wrap this one up here, this series. These videos are available in the playlist about death. I want to do a sitting, another one of these sittings. Hopefully I'll remember in the next coming months about, preparing for death. But this is, I feel like this playlist has progressed a lot the last week or so. And this, thing that I'm doing is really helping me, at least in terms of being a preceptor. The sittings might be the same receiving them, but I'm having deeper experiences giving them. And then, all the rest of these things that are, these benefits I've experienced since doing this thoughtfulness, this thoughtlessness stuff. Okay, so let's wrap this one up here. And this, again, is the end of the 190th edition of Journey series. And I'll probably have some more thoughts about this, but I won't. Here's a tick calling up the bed from the dogs. I'm watching it crawl up towards me. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.